My friends, we're going to begin this video with handing out the Oscars for the best actors of 2023. And the Oscar for the best performance goes to, drumroll, Putin, yes. And of course, we're going to watch back the best performance. Here it is, right here for you. Now, Putin prepared for this acting job his whole life. And he put everything he has into it. You can see it on the screen. When you see the bloody children, deceased children, how women, elderly suffer, how medics die, certainly you clench your fists and your eyes tear up. Well, unfortunately, as you can see, Putin could not memorize this text because he's so famous of an actor, he doesn't need to memorize text. It's just so real, even if he reads it from the paper. This is why we decided to give an Oscar to Putin. I mean, the guy is dead inside. He's a machine, he's a robot, he's a lizard, whatever you want to call him. He's not human. He is the reason for the very things he just said. My friends, yesterday I reported on Ukrainian attack on Sevastopol and Tarankut Peninsula. With Storm Shadow, ATACMS or drones, or all three were used. Well, today we have actually footage of this attack. All of these photos and this video come from the area, but there's a small question mark in this video. Did you notice it? No? Well, let's watch again. This is a snapshot from the video, and I see clearly smoke coming from the Sevastopol Bay. Water, it's bay. Something floating there got hit, and there's no Ukrainian vessels there, so this has to be a Russian ship. Now, there's no reports of any kind of ships being damaged or destroyed. Ukrainians are not claiming anything. Russians are not reporting anything. But this video is right here. I'll leave it up for you to decide if Russian submarine fleet just got another addition, another submarine. As you all know, in Russia's one of the few Muslim regions, Russia has two Muslim regions, Chechnya and Dagestan. In Dagestan, there was a huge riot where the crowd stormed the airport of Dagestan because they were expecting a refugee plane from Israel to come in. And since they are Muslims, they tend to be very negatively minded towards Israeli people or Jewish people. So they started hunting the Jews in the airport. Riot police was deployed, and this riot turned into a full outbreak of anger against the government forces also. People were setting fire to police cars, destroying the government property, looting stores, and Putin needed to react really fast. Obviously, this wasn't under the government control. It doesn't look like it, at least. Putin held a security meeting yesterday and he held a speech. And in that speech, he completely changed the narrative. According to him, these riots in Dagestan, anti-Jewish pogroms in Dagestan, were initiated by the Western intelligence forces, listen to this, operating on Ukrainian soil. So Western intelligence sets up base on Ukrainian soil to initiate anti-Jewish riots in Dagestan. I gotta remind you that Zelensky is Jewish, the Ukrainian president. So in his country, he would not be interested in igniting anti-Jewish revolts. I will now summarize the entire Putin speech in the Security Council meeting because it's too long and boring for you to watch, but I'll summarize it really shortly. He claims that in the Middle East, instead of the Israelis hunting the terrorists, they are punishing the entire nation of Palestine as the principle of collective responsibility. Something that the Russians as a country must accept. Every Russian person in Russia, in my eyes, has the collective responsibility for their government. Secondly, Putin claimed that the United States and the Western powers are using the tensions in the Middle East to divide nations. And lastly, Putin claimed the way he sees it, that the United States needs chaos in the Middle East. I'll let it for you to decide what to make out of this Putin speech. But for a moment, I want to show you this footage. This is riot police being deployed into the Dagestani airport. And I want to guide your attention to how chill they are. They have time. They're just casually jogging, casually walking, while people are destroying shops, looting and hurting Jewish people coming off the planes. These riot police say, we have time, Ivan, don't hurry, you're fine, take your time, take a sip of vodka, we go slowly. Now, my friends, I will read you a thread analyzing the Dagestani riots by Anders Aslund from Twitter. His thread summarizes the situation in the Kremlin quite perfectly, and it's very short. The riots in Dagestan yesterday were important. Now it's becoming clear. Number one, somebody unknown who instigated them through Telegram. Number two, it could have been anybody, which means that Russia is close to destabilization. Number three, to judge from the complete confusion of Putin today at the Security Council meeting, Kremlin was unprepared. We can read a lot of stuff out of the fact that Putin was unprepared for this, meaning that these riots did not happen with his blessing, and he doesn't like anything happening in his country without his knowledge, especially riots against the government or against Jewish people. Jewish religion, by the way, is one of the nationally accepted, state-accepted religions in Russia. It is protected by the law, so these riots are fully illegal in any sense. Number four, both the riots and the disarray at the Security Council do suggest that the Kremlin is in an extreme state of instability. Number five, Ukraine and the West should utilize this opportunity. The Kremlin is out of balance, hit hard, fast. We don't know whether Putin is alive or if the hapless conspiracy artist Petrushev is in charge. Right now, Ukraine and the West should give all they can. And now the comment to this thread is actually really good. Let's start with the fact that those were anti-Jewish pogroms with the calls of kill the Jews and Jews out, or Juden raus in another European language, 1933 to 1945. This is exactly what happened in the 30s in Germany, where civil unrest was focused on one people group. Same is happening in Russia now. The organizers capitalized on Islamist Jew hatred typical throughout Europe and the Middle East. An interesting question is, what was the purpose of the organizers? An Islamist attempt to smash Moscow control? Anything else? Are local clans behind it? Where's the bosses? There is too little information out there right now, but what we can tell is that the Security Council meeting and Putin were not prepared, they were not ready, and they were confused in that meeting, telling us that Kremlin didn't know and it happened without their control. Now, my friends, in this video we'll watch a Jewish person being held captive by the crowd in the Dagestani airfield. Actually, he says he's as Uzbek. Uzbeks are not Jewish mostly, but the crowd doesn't believe him and they're really mad. They're looking and hunting down Jewish people. This just illustrates the situation. I'm Uzbek, but I don't know Uzbek language. I was born in Smolensk. Hey, make sure no one walks past us. Are you trying to mess with us here? Calm down. I've got his passport. So they took away his passport. They're keeping him captive, trying to make sure if he's a Jewish or not. More questioning, and I guide your attention to there are also women in this crowd, and these are semi-young people, the 20s to 40s in the time. I see 30-year-olds here, I see 25-year-olds, I see 40-year-olds. You wait here until we make a decision. They're trying to make a decision what to do with him, based on if he's Jewish or not. Please give me my passport back. I'm not running away from you. Get his phone. They're trying to take his phone also. And now the police arrive. They're trying to save this guy, I guess, trying to free him. This is the situation in Dagestan right now. Anti-Jewish hatred, anti-Jewish pogroms going on. Now, my friends, we have a truthful report from Avdiivka, from a Russian instructor in the area who sends Storm Z units into battle. He instructs them and sends them away to the no man's land, and they usually don't come back. We have his report, and since the battles went really bad for the Russians, this report is quite truthful. I want to share it with you. Let's return to some of our sad circumstances. Storm Z assault detachments in the Avdiivka direction and the southern flank of Bakhmut. I don't know about other directions. Literally in just a few days of active operations are ground down to almost zero. On average, the level of irretrievable losses varies between 40 to 70%, and sanitary losses, according to amount to up to 60 to 30% of personnel. Firstly, we have the problem of an insufficient level of training of personnel, up to blatant situations when people are dressed and equipped rather poorly, given weapons and sent to the front line because of pressure. Much like the very famous Hollywood depicted Stalingrad scene in Enemy at the Gates movie, where just biomass is forced over the Volga River, given a gun or bullets or a Soviet flag and sent to soak up the MG42 machine gun bullets. That's what they use the people for, to soak up German ammunition. Same thing is going on here. Russians and the command structure and the Russian leadership have not changed. They're still using these same tactics. This is a report from the Russian army. It comes from the inside. Secondly, a critical problem is the lack of proper artillery support for attacks and counterattacks, which in fact turn into those notorious meat assaults. See, Russians themselves call it a meat assault. Everybody calls it a meat assault because that's what it is. Now, for the fact that they don't have the artillery support, well, this is the repetitive and boring info I've been telling you for 3 or 4 months, that Ukrainians are hunting Russian artillery pieces and logistical warehouses. It is not grandiose and it's boring to report and very repetitive to listen, but here is the outcome: meat assaults, because Russians don't have the artillery support anymore. And artillery is everything in these battles. Thirdly, there is persistent practice of depriving assault detachments of the initiative in choosing option for carrying out the assigned combat mission, even in cases where detachment commanders are able to propose and implement such options. This basically says that the men who are sent there have no options when or what or where to attack. They will be sent like mindless zombies and they have no right to say anything about anything. Fourthly, assault troops are often thrown into battle in emergency mode, practically off the wheels, without being introduced to the situation and given time to conduct reconnaissance and establish interaction with adjacent units. Now, this is very important because in most NATO armies, one of the key points, even to the lowest infantryman, a private or a corporal, is situational awareness of the battlefield. It doesn't matter who you are. In NATO armies, a single lone soldier with his mind on the battlefield has more freedom of choice than in Russian army. In Russian army, it's a very top-down heavy army. Orders come from above. You don't think, you obey. In the NATO armies, of course, orders are number one, but there is more freedom to maneuver for every isolated mind on the battlefield based on his situational awareness. And this is actually encouraged in NATO armies. And this goes very much against what I just read, that the troops who don't have situational awareness, they're not briefed, they don't have recon information, they don't really know where their troops are or the enemy's troops are, they're just shown a direction of attack. These troops cannot be effective in any way. Fifthly, the high level of irretrievable losses is due to objective difficulties in evacuating the wounded from the battlefield in conditions of predominance and even more so domination of enemy artillery. This means that most of the evacuation happened under Ukrainian artillery fire, which very deadly and very precise, and a lot of the evacuations don't happen, meaning that Russian soldiers who were getting wounded, let's say mortar fire or small kamikaze drones, they don't kill. They wound you in the knee or in the leg, in the shoulder. This wound is not lethal. Well, it shouldn't be, but in this case it is, because for 12 hours the Russian soldier has to be pinned down in no man's land in a hole, not being evacuated, bleeding out slowly. This is how lack of evacuation translates directly into KIAs. The combination of above factors leads to the regular dismantling of assault troops in the trash without them achieving any significant results. Pure truth coming from an inside Russian source. I love these because they're not Ukrainian sources and they're from Russian officers low enough to not have the incentive to lie. Because the higher you are in the Russian army, the more you have to lie. At the same time, more or less trained detachments also suffer heavy losses, with the only difference being that remnants of such detachments periodically still reach contact line and take at least someone with them. So this is a very grim paragraph because it states that even the designniks and the regulars and the trained forces, trained units kind of behave the same way. Only difference is that they are able to go down with inflicting some Ukrainian losses, and that's the best they can hope for. Well, it doesn't matter to the Ukrainian artillery if you are a Mobik or if you're a designnik. It goes the same way, and the tactics between those two units don't really differ anymore. And now the final paragraph, I love it, it summarizes everything. I am aware of the specific attitude of the army command towards these detachments and understand perfectly well that these are essentially penal companies. However, if we put the lyrics aside, we in fact have a frankly irrational use and ineffective waste of a sufficiently motivated human resource. I do agree, even penal companies, penal battalions, or battalions made out of convicts or forcefully mobilized troops, they can be used effectively if trained, motivated, fed, and cared for. But Russia doesn't do any of these things. I will keep these reports coming to you because these are the most truthful and realistic reports from battlefields in Ukraine, because they come from inside Russia, from officers who don't have the incentive to lie. Now, my friends, Russian military blogger Filatov has actually specifically taken apart one of the convoys and why it failed. And I want to go into it because we watched countless videos of these Russian convoys falling under Ukrainian fire, being destroyed. Now we have an analysis by a Russian military blogger Filatov. We're talking about 114th convoy north of Avdiivka from Krasnohorivka. They struck the Terikon. They had a huge armored convoy, about 15 vehicles. What happened to them? I'll read you the report. Russian reporter Filatov, who is present in the Avdiivka front line, explains what went wrong. Here it is. Newly arrived reserves were meant to demine paths for vehicle columns, then to be followed by other forces, including the 114th Brigade. The goal was to overwhelm Ukrainian positions and artillery. However, for unclear reasons, it was the 114th Brigade that went first and ended up under extreme Ukrainian shelling, causing major losses. The following columns faced the same fate as no demining took place. Filatov complains also about disingenuous reports that were being sent to the higher-ups regarding Avdiivka. So what's really going on? Their plan was to use the penal battalions and new mobics to soak up the Ukrainian mines and Ukrainian fire and then send the 114th convoy. But since it's the Russian army and communication is not effective or it is non-existent, the 114th went first, not knowing that the fields were mined and Ukrainians were ready. Now that's the first catastrophe. After this catastrophe, since you don't deliver bad news in the Russian army structure, everybody sent good news up. So the higher-ups got reports of success and they wanted to exploit on that success. So they sent more reserves into the same area, not knowing that it's a total massacre. And so another convoy was sent, and another, and another. And now the higher-ups are learning the situation, and generals will start flying out of the window. Now, my friends, we'll go to the Kherson front, where I will read you a very interesting reports of first-person view drones being used in a new way. I've never seen them being used like that, but I can imagine it's pretty effective actually. It's the Russian military blogger Romanov who is present in the Kherson front. I'll read it to you about some tricks of the enemy, he means the Ukrainians, revealed during my presence. Before tanks or artillery start working, the enemy places smoke in another area in order to distract attention. A very good usage of smokescreen. Diversion. The enemy uses first-person view drones for mine ambushes. Well, this is where it gets interesting. The drone flies up and carefully sits in the ambush, waits for fighters to appear in the range of the explosives. The enemy is observing from the second drones. So either the drone just hovers above, waiting for Russian infantry as a mine planted in the air, or the drone actually goes down, because it can be remote activated, some of them can, and just waits there, because it has a camera, until it sees Russian infantry and then boom, flies into it. So it's like a mine that can be deployed everywhere with eyes and ears. It is weird and it's deadly. It was also plausible to suppress and take one first-person view of the enemy. Among the peculiarities, the batteries are more powerful than ours. The guys have already taken this knowledge into work. So the first sentence means that Ukrainians also are using their first-person view drones to actually hit Russian first-person view drones in mid-air. So it's like this drone collision. One takes down another, both lose. And secondly, Romanov admits that Ukrainian counter-battery fire is much more effective and precise, and we have the same reports from Avdiivka, and we know it's true also in the southern front. So we can state that the only areas that Russians have the artillery superiority is the northern front, Kupiansk. Everywhere else, Ukrainians now have the superiority. It wasn't the case 3 months ago, but it is now. The Israeli Defense Forces have penetrated into the G sector. I cannot say this, I'm so sorry, but they have penetrated in, and the military goal, and the plan of action here is to split it into 3 parts. And you can see it's happening right now. They have reached the main highway, and we'll later look at the map of population density. This line here cuts most population dense area away from other areas, and the goal, of course, is to reach the sea. This is the population density map of the G Strip, and as you can see, the IDF is cutting this part in half right here, and they're cutting also from here with the IDF Defense Forces, and then they're connecting, occupying the entire G Strip. But there's a huge issue for the IDF because there's a ton of weapons. The G Strip is basically a weapons warehouse. Most of the weapons come from Egypt. As you can see, there's a border right here, and not from the roads but from the tunnels. There's a lot of tunnels going from Egypt to the G Strip, and they are supplying the G Strip fighters with weapons, ammunition, everything they need daily. So what the IDF's plan is in the long term, well, here it is actually, dividing the G Strip into 3 different areas and setting up checkpoints. So even if the weapons are flowing in from Egypt, it's very difficult to get past 3 militarized checkpoints in such a small area. You will get busted. Overall, the tactic that Israelis are choosing is harsh control. Very harsh military intervention and direct control over this area. Destruction of the entire infrastructure of the H group. You know, the H group. I cannot say the name, I'm sorry. This is happening right now, and I'll keep you posted on the most important news in the shortest way possible. But this conflict has expanded. As you know, the H group is funded mainly by Iran, but who else is funded by Iran? Houthi rebels. And don't let yourselves to be fooled about the names of the rebels. They have a very capable military force. And how did the conflict just expand? Well, listen to this. The Saudi Arabian armed forces and air defense sites across the country have reportedly been placed into a heightened state of readiness following significant clashes with Houthi fighters over the last 24 hours within the Dagestan region near the border with Yemen. As a result of clashes with the Iranian-backed group, at least 40 Saudi soldiers have been killed. Now, the H group and the Houthis both are funded by Iranian government. If this pushes the Saudis close into a strong open conflict with the Houthi rebels more than it is now, then this is only positive for Israel, and it's a huge expansion of this conflict. To really get an idea of the Houthi military capability, they just held exercises actually yesterday, 30th of October, and we have photos of these exercises with a thread from Joshua Kuntz, and I'll read you the entire thread and show you the photos so we have an idea of how powerful the Houthi rebels actually are. Today, the Houthi supported battalions conducted Al-Aqsa Flood live fire exercises in Yemen. This thread will ID the events, arms and vehicles. Fighters operated a military Mi-8 helicopter, carried an RPG-7 with a PG-7S round, a PKM GP machine gun, MPI, KMS-72, Type 56S and other AK variants. Houthi support battalions fighters used the Type 56-2, a UAV, IRAMs and some other type of rifles. And of course, as you can see, they practice drone warfare, dropping munitions from above, much like we see in Ukraine, only the target here is the Israeli position. Here are 2 photos showing Houthi support battalion fighters using Type 56-1S, a machine gun technical during a live fire exercise. 2 other photos depict some events attendees. One of them brought an MPI-K machine gun. This one right here. They're attending the live fire exercise with a machine gun. More photos of the Houthi support battalion's live fire exercise on October 29th. Fighters used Houthi Rujum UAVs, an SPG-9 recoilless rifle, an RPG-7 with a PJ-7S round, Type 56S, and many other weapons also used in Ukraine. And also we can see the Houthis using an Mi-8 helicopter. They actually have somewhat of an air force. It's not very capable, but they have something. But their ground forces are very capable because they mostly focus on guerrilla warfare, and they are one of the best supplied guerrillas in the world. Let me know please in the comments, my friends, if you are interested in if I keep covering this conflict. Every now and then I will focus of course on Ukraine, but at the end of every video I can put a snippets of most important news about the conflict in the Middle East. What's going on with who? Let me know please. Now my friends, the best part of the video, the butchering of the Patreon names. These are the people who support the channel the most, and I thank you a lot. Mikke Pirk, Keyenna Mae Salzer, Tiler Mukai, Steve Jott Korman, Stein Aas Haga. Thank you to these people for helping and influencing my life directly into the better direction. Also my friends, go and check out my Instagram, link is in the description below. I'll post stuff there that I cannot post on YouTube. I'll see you there. Until my next update, which will be tomorrow, Slava Ukraini, and bye bye.